just going to weigh in on a couple of things because I just want to sort of amplify a couple of things. One of the things that I heard from John just then is that once we get people onboarded, they're not just left to, you know, find their own way. There's a mechanism in place that guides them, or there are, you know, there's a professional development or opportunities, and these things are highlighted. And I think that's important. We want people to stay, right? We want them to stay for the career, and we want them to have these opportunities and all of the things that are attractive to them that make this a value proposition, right, to them to come and stay in the department. So I think that mentorship, and I'm just using that word because, John, you didn't say mentorship, but I felt like that's what you were describing. There's some mechanism in place that you're not just go and your first captain may or may not be good example, may or may not be a good mentor, but you're not lost if you end up with a bad first station captain, right? You're not lost in the process. You still have an opportunity to excel and to find your way through the department, and that's huge in this space. The same equity conversation, I think, is a big deal because equity, and we're almost circling back to where Dan started earlier with, equity doesn't mean we're lowering any standards here. It means that we are making the environment such that people with even physical differences, heights, weights, you know, those sorts of things can find their way to excel and be a good firefighter. So equity doesn't mean we're lowering any standard of performance, right? We still have to do the job. And I think that's important. Two things I want to point out is that diversity and equity, and Billy, I love the way you're saying diversity. It is not race and ethnicity. This is mindset. It is way we think. You know, that's all of that has to do with diversity. But we can, in the traditional, mandate diversity, right? We can policy our way in diversity. We can policy our way even in equity. I can change methods and put them in policy and do that. The third thing we can't do is policy our way out of inclusion. And so in this cultural conversation, how much is that inclusion? And Chief Hugh, you did a little bit on that earlier, is that how does that play into this recruitment scenario? Inclusion once they're onboarded, showing them that opportunity that they want to be part of that team. We already heard team is important. How do I, as a leader, you guys, how do you get there when you can't policy your way out of that?
Let's go to Hugh and talk about that and see what you do in Muncie. And that's actually right where I was going to go. Was how is your culture evolving in that fire company, in that fire department, and kind of tailgate onto what Lori just said, and then my next point, for my participants, is I want to talk about company officer training related to the retention of your people. What I mean by that is the company officer may or may not have a choice in who they're being sent as new employees, but you as the fire chief have invested a whole lot into bringing these new people in. What trainings have you provided, or guidance or policy to your company officer, with policy being the least interested as far as I'm concerned, to make sure that when you deliver them this new employee, they're treated the way you philosophically in the organization want them treated? Let's go to you first at the Muncie Fire Department and touch on that, Hugh, as far as how has your culture evolved? You talked about it wasn't a particularly welcoming place, and now people are really interested in joining. What's happened up there in Muncie?
So, you know, a couple of years ago, we actually formed 2 new line officer positions. We called them sergeants, right, with the specific goal in mind of handling our new members when they come in as candidates, from explaining the culture of the firehouse, what we expect our firehouse to look like and to sound like, to actually start their training before their formal training. So our sergeants would have, on a Sunday morning or a weeknight outside of regular company drill night, they would bring the new candidates together, and it was very well attended from the new candidates, to teach them about their turnout gear, their air packs, to teach them how to stretch lines, raise ladders, importantly, you know, put the tools back so they're ready for the next use, right? So if someone new who may not have any exposure to the fire service before that, right, they walk into the door because their friend told them, hey, this is a great place, you know, we have a good time, it's a great group of people, and then they walk in there and then they're forgotten about until the first firefighter one comes along, which might be 6 months to a year, particularly during, you know, COVID. You got to make sure they're engaged from the beginning, right? And that allowed us to keep new members engaged for a very long time during COVID until they were able to get into a firefighter one class. And once you have them engaged, now they're talking about what they did, right? So the lieutenants and the captain and the chiefs, you know, a couple days after we, you know, these Sunday programs we say, hey, so what'd you guys do on Sunday, right? So they're getting feedback, or they're getting shown that people care about them and how they're progressing and want to keep them engaged from the top all the way down.